It's story time with your creepy Uncle Jizzo. All right, you guys, here we are again. Troll Pal Jizzo here with another episode of Storytime. This particular story comes from my book, All the Devils, which, as you know, is available at this site along with my other books. And this one is called Blind. Let me set the scene. During the summer of 1977, there was a dry period, a time where man could find no weed, no cheap Mexican dirt weed, no Colombian weed, not even the top of the line weed, sensimilla, literally without seeds. That's what all dope is now, but back then, that was the badass dope. Now, in those days, of course, you had to buy weed from a weed dealer. Either a friend who sold out of his house, or a friend of a friend, or in a pinch, a street dealer down at your local barrio. I mean, it sounds archaic now, but the idea that weed would be totally legal and sold over the counter sans felony charges would be considered H.G. Wells science fiction to us. I mean, this was 1977. The California summer, Zuma Beach, Peter Frampton was the king of the airwaves, and thousands of teenage delinquents could find no weed. Now, smoking weed for us was a ritual. It meant a bunch of guys, a good stereo, and a bong. The ritual involved pulling out a window screen, opening up the Frampton Comes Alive record, and laying it flat, then putting the screen down and with thumb and forefingers pushing the cheap-ass weed through the screen to get rid of those damn seeds. Now the stereo, usually mine, was an old but then considered new cutting-edge quadraphonic 4-speaker system. One speaker hung in each of the corners of my room to maximize the dope smoking experience. This 8-track stereo also boasted the greatest hits of our times: Jethro Tull Aqualung, Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon, Led Zeppelin Physical Graffiti, and a prog selection that would push the boundaries of good taste anywhere. Yes, Tales from Topographic Oceans. Yes, Relayer. Yes songs. Songs that went for 8 to 10 minutes and went virtually nowhere. And don't get me started on the Genesis. Now, sitting there getting stoned and sitting there being stoned was what we did. We were teenagers, man. We had our whole lives ahead of us. It was a different time than now. There was pure, unadulterated freedom then. You remember freedom? Only the old can truly appreciate what it meant to be free. No cameras everywhere, no tracking cell phones, no Skynet, no cable TV, no constant propaganda pumped through the veins, and of course, no bone-crushing debt. If you had a $10 bag of weed and a stereo and a large Dr. Pepper, you were king of the world. And that's pretty much how we felt until the aforementioned sudden weed shortage knocked us clean and sober. I was an avid reader then, still am, and I was obsessed with the books of Ernesto Mazda, Tales of Courage, The Second Man of Courage, and especially that book, A Separate Trip. Now this book was a psychedelic trip worthy of Timothy Leary himself. Hallucinogenic drugs shaken and stirred, and imaginary desert vistas, all guided by the learned desert brujo, Don Matilda. Now, whether Don Matilda was real or not didn't really matter. What hooked me were the flights of fancy conjured up by the drug-taking experience. Enlightenment, illumination. I had a kundalini hard-on just thinking about it. Now, some of Ernesto's most vivid drug experiences focused on the ingestion of Jimson weed, also called loco weed. We all knew what Jimson weed was. It grew wild all over California. You'd see it all along the roadsides that we took to the beach every day. Now, my thought was This plant was everywhere for the taking. Apparently, it got you high, and it was free. What could possibly go wrong? When I suggested it to my friends as a possible alternative to our weed shortage, everyone agreed. Splendid idea. Excellent, Jizzo. So one day, I drove up to Malibu Canyon Road, just past Calabasas, and I picked a batch of this loco weed. And for good measure, I picked a batch of the accompanying seed pods. Apparently they got you high too. Oh, innocent child, you know not what you do. I brought the plants home, and I did what I normally did when we stole other people's pot plants. I baked the leaves in the oven to dry them. Again, I'll set the scene. Jack's parents were gone that night, so I brought the Jimson weed over to his house, and we set up the bong and the stereo. We were preparing the ritual as before, only this time we were doing it with unknown drugs. So we put on Jethro Tull's Thick as a Brick record, which is an apt metaphor for what was about to happen, and the ritual began. We each took several bong hits of the Jimson, and we sat and we waited. I don't remember if we got high at all. Maybe we thought we did. Maybe we tried to convince ourselves that it was just as good as real pot. I don't know. What do you think? I asked, passing the bong over to Jack. I don't know, he said, shrugging. I think I'm high. Well, if you think you're high, then maybe you're not high at all. This was going nowhere. The ritual was being ruined. And then I thought of the seeds. Hey, you know what? These are supposed to get you high, I said, and I pulled the green seed pods out of the bag that I had brought them with. I showed them to the guys who looked a bit puzzled. I broke open one of the pods and I showed them the multitude of seeds therein. I think you're supposed to eat the seeds, I said, with all the gusto only an amateur brujo could muster. Well, how many? Asked Bert. I don't know, I said. Maybe a tablespoon? There it was. There it was. The expert had spoken. Yeah, dude, sounds good. Let's all swallow a tablespoon of these unknown seeds from this dangerous psychotropic plant the local Indians called loco weed. It's only weed, right? So that's what we did. We each broke open one of the pods and swallowed a big spoonful of these disgusting seeds. I myself led the way by swallowing a whole tablespoon of the rich magical drug used as a potion for centuries by shamans and warlocks alike. All because of a book I read by a man who probably concocted the whole experience out of his head to get his PhD. Excellent. So we ate the seeds and we waited. Doon 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 doon. A half hour went by and nothing happened. We sat there hoping for a miracle, but it seemed that this so-called drug was a letdown. After 45 minutes, I concluded that Ernesto Mazda was a fraud. Bert actually broke the silence. F this, he said, getting to his feet. I'm not high at all. And he was right. None of us were. We'd been duped. We'd been bamboozled. I have football practice tomorrow, Bert turned to me. Sorry, dude, but this drug is double fucking deuces. And I had to agree. This drug was a sham-a-lam. Shamans be damned, I said. This exchange sort of concluded the night. Jack turned off the stereo. I bade my fellow dopers farewell, and I drove home discouraged and disillusioned. Old Tim Leary had been wrong after all. Anyway, the next morning, I woke up as usual. My mom was gone, so I sauntered over to the kitchen and poured myself a coffee, then sat down on the easy chair facing the TV and clicked the TV on. I grabbed the TV guide from the end table, opened it up, and only then did I realize that I was blind. Blind, I tells ya. I looked at the TV guide again. All the text was a total blur. I moved the paper closer, and it was actually worse. Even the picture ads were illegible. Then I held my hand up to my face. It looked like a blob of pink cotton candy. I could still see objects far away, but up close, I was totally out of focus. This had never happened to me before. I was a kid. So I set down my coffee cup, I stood up, and I gathered myself fully for the Chernobyl-sized panic attack growing inside of me. Then the phone rang, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. Hello? I'm fucking blind! It was Bert. I can't fucking see! Yeah, I said, panicked. Me too. What happened? What happened? He said. It was the weed. The weed must have fucked us up. What am I gonna do? I have football practice this afternoon and I can't fucking see. Well, you can't go to football practice, I said. Tell him you're sick. I am sick, motherfucker. I'm fucking blind. Okay, calm down. I'll think of something. I said this to calm Bert down, but in all honesty, I had no solution or even a clue what to do. Bert hung up and I sat there in my silent house like an invalid on his deathbed, frantically pushing the call button on his bedside monitor for someone to save him. I was 16 years old, and now I'm legally blind. Thanks to you, Ernesto, you fucking hack. You and Don Matilda can go fuck yourselves. Thanks a lot. And once again, thanks a lot, drugs. Then the phone rang again. It was Jack this time. Ring! Motherfucker, I'm blind! We're all blind. Yes, I said into the phone. I'm blind too. So's Bert. He's freaking. Well, aren't you? What does the book say? The book? The book, the Ernesto book. The book you convinced me to get high from. The fucking Ernesto made me blind book. He never mentioned blindness, I said. To be fair, I couldn't quite remember what he said about Jimson weed. My memory was as blurry as my eyes were. See, drugs don't make you go blind. Only masturbation makes you go blind. Drugs are good. Drugs are good. They're friendly. They're supposed to open up the doors of perception like Aldous Huxley said. All seeing stars and love everywhere and kiss the earth, that sort of thing. However, we seem to have taken a wrong turn. What's the plan? Jack cried. Well, the plan is to see again. I'll get the book and I'll come over. I'll come over to your house. We'll figure it out. Come over? Come over? Yeah. Come over. That's a good idea, he said. And, but don't say anything to my parents about, being blind. They already don't dig you. So we had a plan. I didn't want to take a chance on driving, so I walked the half mile over to Jack's place. And that really clinched it, the whole being blind thing. If I concentrated just hard enough, staring straight ahead, I could just manage walking on the sidewalk. But when my eyes deviated from side to side, or worse, if I looked down, my heart would seize. Cars went by in a blur. I couldn't see the walk, don't walk signs, only colored blobs of green and red. Crossing the main street on Corbin was a nightmare. I only kept it together by staying between the blurry white lines of the crosswalk. And so I finally made it to Jack's house. He answered the door in a cold sweat. And when I walked into his house, the parents looked at me from the kitchen. I couldn't see their faces, but the vibe was clear enough. I was no damn good. See, Jack's parents had high hopes for their son, and I was fucking everything up. Jack was going to be an accountant someday, just like his father before him. And you can't be a good accountant if you're fucking stoned all the time, which we were. If they only knew, things had just gotten worse. So we went to Jack's bedroom. Bert was already there, sitting on the bed, also sweating. When he saw me, I got the death stare. I got the fuck you stare. Thanks, dude, he said. Thanks a lot for making me go blind. You're not blind, I said, trying to diffuse the situation. Blind. He's just thinking to himself, blind, fucking blind. He turned to me. Jack said you brought the book and you were going to cure us. Oh, this book? It doesn't really say anything about being blind. And even if it did, how could I even read it? I'm blind too. I'm just as blind as you are. Jack picked up his big Texas Instruments calculator. See this? This is fucking useless now. I can't do math. I can't do it. Keep your voice down, I said. Your folks already hate me. This might not be a good time to tell them about the whole blindness thing. We sat silent for a while, the three of us. I mean, teenagers are supposed to be invulnerable, right? We fight and we fuck and nothing untoward happens to us because we're bulletproof. This was not supposed to be happening. Maybe it's only temporary, I offered. Maybe it wears off. Jack turned on his stereo. We stopped talking and listened. Perhaps we could be healed by the soothing sounds of Aerosmith rocks. I had my head in my hands and I was trying to think of a possible solution when I casually looked up at Jack's stereo speakers and I cried out, "Look at the speakers! Look at the speakers! Do you see it?" We all looked up and I swear you could see little shooting stars of light jumping out of the speakers. Little photon spinning comets moving to the music. I swear to God, it's true. It looked like those undersea luminescent jellyfish creatures on the Jacques Cousteau specials captured on the bottom of the ocean. I mean, they moved with intention, like they were alive. They were alive. It was the music that would heal us. The music and its medicine sent out its luminescent healing powers, and we three soaked it all in. For whatever reason, it made us feel better, and that was enough. That and being together, of course, the bond, the friendship. The music played and the bouncing light patterns filled the rooms, and we closed our eyes and the hours slipped away. We spent that whole afternoon staring at those strange light creatures huddled in Jack's bedroom. And we all went home that night, hopeful and exhausted. The next morning was a miracle. We could see again. The drug had apparently worn off, and all was good with the retinas again. My phone rang this time, and it was Jack, and it was good news. It was laughter and relief. Out came the jokes, the barbs, the banter came back, and all was good in our world again. We watched some TV and ate sugary cereal out of the box, and lo and behold, a week later, even the weed came back. The valley was once again flush with cheap Mexican weed, so we all bought a bag, and we celebrated that night with the ritual. The stereo belched forth its tune, and the bong sat in the center of the room, the place of honor, the little curls of smoke rising from the lip all the way up to weed heaven. We four pimply folk talked about the present and the future. Jack was going to be an accountant, a cool accountant, and Bert was going to be a professional football player, and me, I was going to be a singer in a famous rock band. I was going to be rich and fuck a million chicks, and I was going to live my life how I thought the Led Zeppelin band lived their lives. All their mystery and majesty, the hammer of the gods. I was going to be a rock singer, even though at that time I could barely sing, and I had no equipment, and I couldn't play the guitar, but these things were not important. My dreams were still real, and it was destiny. I would somehow beat the odds and be one of the chosen few, and I would somehow rise above all my other fellow Valley musicians. I would open up for AC/DC in arenas, and I would play in stadiums, and I would tour the world, and people in faraway countries would know my name. My teenage dreams were fulfilled even beyond my wildest dreams. Records, tours, MTV, music as a job for the last 30 years. How surreal it would sound to a 16-year-old kid in his bedroom listening to Led Zeppelin Kashmir on an old 8-track stereo, stoned immaculate. The mind sits and the mind is boggled.